by man. We've had a park here for 4 years, and thanks to this unit, we haven't had a bear problem in the park yet. I'll show you how it works.
Our land, our resources, and our people, we pledge ourselves to act as good stewards on behalf of all Albertans. Amen.
Introduction of visitors. Presenting petitions. Reading and receiving petitions. Introduction of bills. Tabling returns and reports.
Report of the Chief Electoral Officer pursuant to Section 36, subsection 1 of the Election Finances and Contributions Disclosure Act.
Introduction of special guests.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to introduce to you and to the members of this Assembly 4 guests who are seated in the public gallery. All 4 are members of the Alberta Cattle Commission. From Barrhead, Mr. Dale Grigg, an elected director for Zone 8. From Redwater, Gladys Waskowicz, a director at large for the Cattle Commission. From Newbrook, Ilke Herman, a delegate. And from Grassland, Marion Wonders, also a delegate for Zone 8. I would like them to rise and to receive a warm welcome from this Assembly.
Ministerial statements. Oral question period.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm just looking around to find which minister to ask a question to, but I'll start off with the Associate Minister of Agriculture. It has to do with some discussion we've had in the last couple of days in regard to the U.S. Subsidy to the Soviet Union. It appears by this that the war will continue on Canadian farmers. As the minister is aware, there's talk about them doing the same with China. But I'd ask the minister, does the minister have an estimate of how much money will be lost to Canadian farm economy this year? And specifically, do we have any knowledge of how much will be lost to the Alberta farmers with this latest subsidy to the Soviet Union by the United States?
Mr. Speaker, in answer to the Leader of the Opposition's question, no, I don't have that information, but I'll take that question as notice. And I might say that we are making representation to the federal government in opposition of this practice. Well,
just to follow up then, Mr. Speaker, could the minister indicate whether the Alberta government, I suppose discussions going on right now, is prepared to push the federal government as hard as possible so that they would see the need for deficiency payments? Is this a strong issue at this First Minister's Conference today?
So the federal government would see need for the federal deficiency payments? The assurance that I can give to the Honourable Leader of the Opposition is that agriculture is one of the chief topics of discussion, and we'll do everything in the power of this province to assure that our farmers remain viable. And if that means discussing all options, that's what we'll discuss.
Let me sum up to either the Deputy Premier or the Associate Minister of Agriculture. Specifically, during these talks, is the Alberta government prepared to push hard on deficiency payments? Perhaps the Deputy Premier could tell us what's going on.
Mr. Speaker, I can't say what is going on today over at Government House. The question of agriculture is certainly one of the main topics on the agenda as a sub-agenda item under the economy. And the first item for discussion under that is the National Agricultural Strategy. The way the agenda is structured, it's particularly wide-ranging and loose in order to allow all the provinces to have a wide scope of parameters in which to be able to make their comments. It would be very surprising in view of the serious nature of this topic if the question isn't addressed very seriously.
Well, supplementary question. I guess just one or two people know what's going on there, and obviously they're not here. But perhaps the Deputy Premier could enlighten us as to the government measures in view of the protectionist measures being advocated, and we're seeing them almost every day from the United States. Is this government prepared to ask for a moratorium on the free trade talks till after the American elections, when perhaps the protectionist sentiments might not be as high?
Mr. Speaker, in view of the seriousness of that question and the conference that's going on today and tomorrow, I think it would be wise to take the question as notice. I know the Premier will be reporting to the House on the outcome of the conference, and certainly it would be better if the question was answered at that time.
Member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Mr. Speaker, this is to the Associate Minister. After thanking Deputy Premier for the fact that apparently there is an agenda which we never got filed in the House, to the Associate Minister of Agriculture, are we now prepared, in view of the subsidies we offered to Americans, or the Americans are offering for their grain, to drop the idea of $10 wheat for $10 bushel for domestic wheat, when it now appears we could underemploy or put out of business many of our Alberta or Western Canada bakeries and people associated in the flour milling trade?
Mr. Speaker, I'm glad the leader of the Liberal Party asked that question, because the supposition that we could put the millers out of business is ridiculous. There are 67 loaves of wheat, or loaves of bread in a bushel of wheat. That's 6.7 cents a loaf. And if you raise it from $7 to $10, presumably you raise it another 3 to 5 cents. So, no, sir. Show me the figures.
Question, supplementary. Second main question, Leader of the Opposition.
My second question, in absence of the Treasurer, I think the Minister of Housing may be aware of this, but until recently it has been the case that whether or not a person filed a tax return by the April 30th deadline, they had 12 months from the end of the taxation year to submit a claim for the Renter's Assistance Tax Credit. It's our information that since May the 14th, a renter who does not submit a tax credit by a claim by April the 30th will automatically lose the right to the tax credit. My question, Mr. Speaker, flowing from that is, why has the government decided to disentitle renters who do not file a tax credit claim by April the 30th, when the statutes seem to state clearly that they may be submitted up to a year after the end of the tax year?
Mr. Speaker, my understanding has always been that this is a process when a person files their personal tax return, and the calculation is made as part of the return. So that would justify, I think, the view that if one files one's return on time, one would have it in by April the 30th. However, if the Honourable Leader is pointing to a statutory provision which allows a further time, of course that would be honored.
Supplementary question to the Minister. It's our understanding that there's been a change made just recently, that there used to be that year leeway, and now that there isn't. My question then flowing then, renters who are due a refund from the government are not required to file a tax return by April the 30th. Why then specifically would we be penalizing renters in this case?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I know of no situation that would penalize renters in those circumstances. I will be pleased to take the question as noticed as third acting treasurer and discuss that with the provincial treasurer and reply in exact detail.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate that. And would the minister then, and I think they'll find that this is the case, it's happening, would, as the minister, reconsider this matter and at least give a year moratorium on this measure so people wouldn't be caught short this year?
Mr. Speaker, I don't know in detail the answer the treasurer would give, but the proposition implicit in the question sounds reasonable to me.
Main question, Leader of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is to the Associate Minister of Agriculture. Associate Minister, for 15 years now, Tory governments have talked about economic diversification, but let's look at the scorecard. We have increased unemployment, diminished consumer confidence, dropping housing starts. They don't want to hear the records. Don't want to hear their things, eh? Okay. Lower non-residential investment. Worst of all, falling farm receipts, the Associate Minister. Now, this economy that Data Resources of Canada refers to in terms such as disastrous hardship. Now, given the poor results of this, the Liberal opposition wishes to offer some constructive suggestions for diversifying Alberta agriculture.
Honourable member, please. The question, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was just about to hit that. You have to warm them up a little ahead of time over there. Now, will the
question?
Initiative to encourage and support the production and distribution of Alberta-grown produce in the $300 million market in this province, or the $3.6 billion market across Canada?
In the preamble to the question, if you have any good ideas, well, I'd be happy to receive them. As far as the question is concerned, if you ask me what I think you asked, because you preambled so much that you were cut off part of the time, would the Alberta government work towards increasing the market share of Alberta farmers? Of course we would.
We'd like something more concrete than good intentions. However, that's a start in the right direction. Now, will the government investigate ways of using an estimated 42 million cubic feet of gas per day? 42 million cubic feet of gas per day is now being flared, or wasted gas. Could we use that some way or another to heat greenhouses in Alberta?
Certainly, if there's a good idea and a way of utilizing waste gas to improve the market gardening or greenhouse marketing in this province, we'll look at all proposals and ideas.
The idea, of course, is to move the greenhouses to where the gas is rather than try to take the gas to the greenhouses, because right now the gas is going off for nothing. Now, will the government, these again are all positive suggestions, Madam Minister, will the government make special efforts to encourage and support agri-tech corporations or companies in their development of computerized, hydroponic, and other advanced technology means of competing in Alberta and the Canadian produce markets?
Mr. Speaker, this sounds like an excellent idea, and maybe the Minister of Economic Development would like to supplement my remarks.
Mr. Speaker, I am in the happy position today to be able to speak for both economic development and technology, research, and telecommunications. And Mr. Speaker, we would be delighted to receive ideas of the use of technology, whether it's hydroponics and computerized control of hydroponics or pure hydroponics controlled by the Honourable Leader of the Liberal Party. Whoever controls it, any of those good ideas, we'd be welcome to look at.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm making great headway. I've got the price of wheat increase, our price of bread down from 15 cents to 5 cents. Now we're going to do hydroponics. Would the Associate Minister, and possibly she'll need the acting third, fourth, or fifth treasurer on this one, I don't know, assure Alberta farmers that the funding for agricultural research and resource development, that's vote 5 in the budget, if you want to pull out that blue thing underneath your knees there, will be increased next year and not cut as it was by 21% this year.
For question period, I'm sorry, it's a question for the estimates. Supplementary question? That's your, well, your third question.
Well, it can't be a question, I'm sorry.
Honourable member, you tried a third question, it was out of order, therefore that's whack at the back. Supplementary questions. Leader of the Representative Party, followed by the member for Wainwright.
Mr. Speaker.
Point of order later. Point later. Okay.
Mr. Speaker, under the circumstance, I'd like to follow up a question I asked on Friday relative to Section 114 of the Labour Relations Act as to whether there's any further progress with regards to the application of that act or any other secondary picketing that's gone on that is outside of the law.
Mr. Speaker, there's been no further action over the weekend that I'm aware of, and of course the Attorney General is not here at this time, but I'll take it as notice and he can report back in due course.
Supplementary. Member for Wainwright, followed by the member for Calgary Mountain View.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To the Minister of Technology, Research and Telecommunications concerning the private line installation program announced last spring. In the case of a business or an individual that feel circumstances force them to install a private line before the provincial program comes through, would there be any reimbursement to the individual on the difference in cost?
Mr. Speaker, if I understand the question correctly, it would seem to me that an individual of which who's being used in this illustration would be in a position quite similar to the position of other individual subscribers who have taken private line service in rural areas prior to this time, and the same consideration would be given eventually to that to an individual taking it now post the announcement but before the commencement of the program, as would have applied to anyone who had had private line service prior to the announcement, but before the program actually commences.
Supplementary then, how do we establish the priority order, and will it be announced publicly so people know, so they can make arrangements whether they should put their own line in or whether they should wait?
Mr. Speaker, there are two technical considerations at least which will or may influence the order of areas in terms of the installation of private lines. The first is that the switching equipment must have a capacity to be able to handle that kind of equipment, that kind of line service. My understanding is that a good portion of the province already meets that test. The second technical question concerns the number of or capacity of individual lines between the switching equipment and the subscribers, and that varies from area to area. It may be a consideration in terms of the priority that is given to to one area of the province over another. Mr. Speaker, if I may just conclude with the observation that I've had many people, many honourable members, seeking on behalf of their constituents to have a priority in the individual line service. The difficult question will inevitably arise that either we have to make some arbitrary choices, I believe, about which area gets private line service first, or we can put in the technical provisions for the private line service and turn the whole province up at once, but that would mean that some people wouldn't get it as quickly as they otherwise would.
Supplementary, member for Vegreville.
Supplementary to the Minister, Mr. Speaker, if the Minister isn't able at this point to tell us when the project will begin and where, will he tell us when we will know? When can people expect this project to begin in rural Alberta?
Well, a part of the project, pardon me, Mr. Speaker, the part of the project has already commenced, and that's the turning up of the, or the speeding up of the modernization of the switching equipment. As to the specific switching area, which might be the first to obtain private line service or individual line service, that announcement, I imagine, will come late in 1986, but I believe it will be in 1986. I can't offer any speculation at the moment as to what locale that would be.
Member for Westlock Sturgeon.
Supplementary to the Minister, continuing my Be Kind to Ministers Day, could I make the suggestion on how to beat the priority system by using, okay, I'll phrase it in a point of a question then if you want to. Could the Minister consider a system that's already used by the government in allotting a hunting license, in other words, a lottery to see who is coming up there, but putting the names in the hat and which order they should be hooked up?
Well, Mr. Speaker, obviously the government and the minister could consider that, and I'm pleased that the honourable leader of the Liberal Party has found an opportunity to make that representation since he missed the throne speech, the budget, and all the private motions to this time.
Member for Calgary Mountain View, followed by the member for Edmonton Gold Bar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Recreation and Parks. And my questions are in regard to the contract details between the government and Ski Kananaskis Incorporated. I'd like to ask the Minister, what is the intention of the government in regards to tabling those contract details? Will they be tabling that information in the Assembly?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I hesitate to answer that in regards to the fact it's on the order paper, and if the member would await the response, it would be there.
Long time.
Well, Mr. Speaker, yes, it's been on the order paper for some time. The previous minister in 1983 tabled the operation and lease agreement with the operator of the Kananaskis Golf Course. Why would it not be reasonable to table the agreement with Ski Kananaskis inasmuch as a similar agreement has previously been tabled in this Assembly? What's different?
The line of questioning is indeed out of order because of the matter being on the order paper, honourable member.
Okay, then, Mr. Speaker, I would ask the Minister in terms of the policy of the government. Is it the policy for the government to subsidize a ski operation to the point that it undercuts other existing businesses?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I certainly welcome the opportunity to clarify many misunderstandings that the member might have or that he wished to lead to the general public at large. And it certainly isn't the intent of this government to allow any operator to subsidize at the expense of the Alberta taxpayer. And if the honourable member, Mr. Speaker, should be aware that the minister will annually approve the increase or decrease in the fee disbursement in pertaining to the Nikiska ski area. That's subject to annual review, and I would welcome any presentations or suggestions that the honourable member may have or general public at large pertaining to any fee schedule. Fee schedules have not been set, and they will be, but I'm certain that they will not be established at anything other than subject to existing marketing conditions, and that would would be with regard to having subject to the fees that would be payable on other similar ski areas.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary. Did the minister approve the ski lift ticket prices announced by Ski Kananaskis Incorporated?
Well, I'm not aware, Mr. Speaker, that there was any announcement. I believe there was something in the media purported to be, but there's no formal announcement because it will be approved by this office and this minister first.
Supplementary. Member for Edmonton Meadowlark.
Speaker, supplementary to the minister. There seems to me to be much to question about the conduct of the Kananaskis project. Why would the government incur the additional expense of hiring Mr. Ron Gitter, who was an ex-MLA and a previous Conservative Party leadership candidate, to put together the deal to build the Kananaskis Hotel when this would surely have better been the responsibility of existing departmental staff and existing ministerial staff?
Chair has great difficulty with the question, which has been raised before in question period. It's also been a matter with regard to the order paper, and the answers were supplied to the House. Chair recognizes member for supplementary, member for Clover Bar.
Supplementary question to the minister. Can the minister indicate, or is he in a position to remember, what support through the provincial federal government has already been given last year to ski operators Marmot, Norquay, Lake Louise? Can the minister indicate what support was given to these facilities last year?
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker, I'm not able to answer that. I'd be pleased to take it under advisement and report back to the member.
Member for Edmonton Goldbar, followed by the member for Clover Bar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Labour responsible for personnel. This government, Mr. Speaker, has from time to time spoken out in favour of equal employment opportunities for all Albertans, but actions and not words are what we'd like to see. Does this government have an employment equity program in place for the civil service?
Mr. Speaker, I have great difficulty with this collection of different phrases that are used. This government has for 15 years supported the concept of equal pay for equal work, and I would refer members to the example of the registered nursing assistants and the nursing orderlies in hospitals, where those were equalized after an appeal through the appropriate mechanism. The Department and Personnel Administration Office have persistently offered programs to women employees of the government to upgrade their standards and to be in a better position for promotion. We will continue to do that.
Mr. Speaker, perhaps the minister can tell us what targets and goals the government has established for achieving this employment equity in the government.
Mr. Speaker, as I already said, I'm not quite sure what the honourable member means by employment equity. We will certainly continue to offer equal opportunity for employment with the government, regardless of sex, racial origin, or other items, and we will continue to offer equal chance for promotion. We have a merit system within the government service. We have programs to upgrade our employees and to enable them to progress through the public service. Those are on record, and they will continue to operate.
Mr. Speaker, just to be clear then, employment equity is perhaps could be synonymous with affirmative action, although not precisely. And I'll continue with the questions on the subject then. Is it this government's intention at some point in their near future to put an aggressive employment equity program in place for the civil service?
Mr. Speaker, I think I've answered that question already. We have programs which are, we have some special programs for our female employees. Those exist, they have existed, and will continue to exist.
A final supplementary then, Mr. Speaker, I'd have to say the answer has to be no. But perhaps the minister can tell us who in the government is assigned to promoting or evaluating the programs that he has variously described under employment equity terminology.
Mr. Speaker, if the honourable member would refer to the Hansard record of my estimates, I think there are some numbers in there.
Member for Edmonton Highlands.
I wonder if the minister is prepared to rule out at this time equal pay for work of equal value as a measure by which the $10,500 per year gender wage gap in the Alberta Public Service could be eliminated.
Mr. Speaker, it is not the intention of the government to introduce a program such as mentioned by the honourable member. We are, instead of attempting measures which are essentially window dressing, we are attempting to give equal opportunity to the female members in the public service. And the honourable member, I will refer to the same numbers in the discussion of my estimates that I referred to for the member for Edmonton Goldbar. Those numbers are on the record, and I think they are significant numbers, and the proof is in the pudding.
Member for Clover Bar, followed by the member for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the Minister of Transportation and Utilities, and it deals with a proposal by the former federal Transport Minister, the Deputy Prime Minister, and this has to do with the incorporation of the Yellowhead Highway into the Trans-Canada system. Can the Minister indicate what progress is being made between the two levels of government to incorporate the Yellowhead into the Trans-Canada system of highways?
Well, Mr. Speaker, as a result of that conversation taking place prior to my taking over the Department of Transportation and Utilities, I followed up with a letter to the federal minister, the Honourable Mr. Crosby, and I haven't had a response back from him yet. But I also have had a meeting with the Yellowhead Highway Association, who are supporting the designation of the second or the northern leg of the Trans-Canada, and with that, hopefully some federal funding that may be available to us.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary question to the Minister of Tourism. Can the Minister indicate what studies have been done by the Minister's Department to advise the government what economic benefits there are to Northern Alberta by having this part of the Trans-Canada highway system?
Mr. Speaker, I can't speak to any specific studies that may have been done. However, I too have met with the Yellowhead Highway Association, and it would seem to be good economic sense to have a route through Northern Alberta that was so designated. It would certainly attract more traffic that is now using the U.S. route or the Trans-Canada route only, and open up another option. So, Mr. Speaker, I can't speak to any specific studies except that the information that I have been given, it would make good economic sense.
Mr. Speaker, back to Mr. Transportation. Can the Minister indicate what priority the government has placed in this, or the Minister has placed in his department to work as feverishly as they can to make sure that next spring this is designated? Is there a deadline been established, I guess, is the question that I'm trying to find out, Mr. Speaker.
Not to my knowledge, Mr. Speaker, but let me make it clear that the construction of the twinning of Highway 16 east and west of the City of Edmonton is on schedule, and in some cases slightly ahead of schedule, and the dates that we anticipate that completion is 1990 to the west and 1991 to the east, and that should not change. If there is a designation, we may have included in that some additional funds, but that should not change. As far as any delays that may occur, we may have the opportunity, once we know what the designation may be, to look at whether there's any opportunity to speed it up beyond that particular date that ties in the acquisition of land and all of the other factors that are involved in the twinning process.
Mr. Speaker, the final supplementary, Minister, then the twinning of the highway west of Edmonton to Jasper, what percentage of that highway has been completed at this time to 4-lane specifications?
Mr. Speaker, I don't have those figures with me right at the moment, but I can certainly get them and provide them to the House.
Supplementary question, member for West Loch Sturgeon.
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker, to the Minister of Transportation. Would the government consider going it alone on a speed-up process? Is it necessary to get the federal grant before the government would consider speeding up the 1990 deadline?
Mr. Speaker, the intent was to do the twinning without the federal government being involved, and after the discussions that took place with the then Minister of Transportation about the possibility of some designation for a second Trans-Canada route, that was just a plus in the sense of what we were doing. It had nothing to do with the scheduling that we had already put in place from the previous minister and the government at the time.
Member for Vegreville.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the minister have any recent figures regarding the traffic flows on this very major highway that would induce him to speed up the 1991 projected completion date for twinning of the highway east of Edmonton?
I don't have them with me, Mr. Speaker, but I think it should be pointed out that the 1990 and 1991 schedules that were prepared some time ago are being met at this point in time, and they took into account all of the necessary involvement in getting land acquisition and all of the other factors are there, and it looks at this particular point in time, those are basically right on target as far as the time. I'm not sure we can speed it up anymore.
Member for Edmonton Strathcona, followed by the member for Edmonton Mill Woods.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question, Mr. Speaker, is to the Minister of Community and Occupational Health and concerns injured workers' pensions. Such workers haven't had their pensions increased since the 1st of January 1982. This now amounts to a 30% reduction in their pensions in real terms owing to inflation. In view of the Minister's statement on the 26th of June to this Assembly that he hoped to be making a decision on the matter in the days ahead, and it's now 1.5 months ahead, Mr. Speaker, when is he going to remedy this lamentable injustice?
Mr. Speaker, we've, as I said on that date, I guess now some 45 days ago, that it was a matter that I was discussing with my colleagues in the Executive Council as well as my government caucus colleagues. It is still a matter that's under careful consideration. I accept the representation of the honourable member and will add that to the many calls.
How long do we need to bring it up?
How long does it take?
Supplementary, Mr. Speaker. Will the Minister see to it that in future these pensions will be linked to the consumer price index, much as old age pensions are, to avoid the necessity of waiting until legislative time can be found for every amendment to the Act?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I believe that any number of government programs that we have in this province provide pensioners, provide our seniors, provide any number of Albertans with some very unique programs. And those programs must be factored into any increase that we might provide by way of pensions under the Public Service Pension Plan or the Workers' Compensation Plan or whatever. And all of those are factored in. So I believe that a formula, a legislated formula that might track the consumer price index, I don't think that that's something that we would want to use in this province. However, I accept the representation, and I'd suggest perhaps that the honourable member might want to make that suggestion when the legislature strikes a select committee to review workers' compensation in the province.
Mr. Speaker, supplementary, the honourable minister speaks of consultation with cabinet colleagues and so on, which is normal, except that this legislation was first promised, I understand, in the spring of 85, then postponed to the fall of 85, then to this spring. Will the minister assure us that the necessary legislation on this point will be forthcoming at this sitting?
No, Mr. Speaker, I can't make that commitment because I wouldn't want to prejudge the discussion with my colleagues.
You're talking to them.
Final supplement.
Don't you run your own department?
In making the provision that will be made, will the minister give the House his assurance that the general levels of compensation will remain as at present under legislative control, but subject to cost of living adjustment or any other form that is applicable, and will not be shifted into the regulations?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I couldn't make that commitment. I perhaps don't follow the drift of the honourable member, but if I may just react to one comment to his friend at his right, when he suggests that do I run the department? I don't think the honourable member would want to see a minister of the Crown, whether he's taking on new responsibilities or continuing other ones, to just automatically...
Sorry, order, please. All right. The minister is supposed to reply to the questioner rather than to any side comment that may have been made by any other member in the House. The chair recognizes the member for Edmonton Mill Woods, followed by the member for Calgary Buffalo.
Mr. Speaker, my question is to the minister who's sitting in for the absent Minister of Economic Development. In light of the recent Commonwealth leaders meeting in London, in which our Canadian Prime Minister supported a call for more severe sanctions against South Africa, can we be advised today if there has been meetings on the part of the government with industry leaders to develop alternative markets for the $40 million of Alberta sulphur that is now currently going to South Africa?
Mr. Speaker, as the honourable member so astutely observed, the minister in question is absent today. I'm pleased to take his question as notice, and I'm sure the minister will be quite ready to respond tomorrow or the next day.
A supplementary question then perhaps to the Deputy Premier, because the Premier has publicly stated that he would support restrictions of Alberta sulphur shipments to South Africa if the federal government requested them. And so I would ask him then if he can advise us what contacts the government has made with industry representatives to discuss options about restricting sales or cancelling them to South Africa, and to get some action as well with his federal counterpart.
No, I can't, Mr. Speaker, but I'll be glad to take the question as notice and have it answered when the Premier returns to the House.
The question then, can the Deputy Premier perhaps also advise if his government has taken any initiatives subsequent to the Commonwealth leaders meeting to improve the trade and aid links that we have with our Commonwealth brothers nations or sister nations in southern Africa who are being hard hit by the punitive actions of the Republic of South Africa?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think it should be clear that aside from any issue that's involved directly with sanctions or any other kind of curtailment on international trade, that this government is always continuously busy with respect to the matter of international trade and development, and it's been the practice to have a minister especially assigned to that practice, and the record speaks for itself. It's quite remarkable.
Supplementary question, Mr. Speaker. Could we have a public statement from the Deputy Premier today that, in fact, he does endorse the federal government, the Canadian government, the Commonwealth leaders' positions on sanctions towards South Africa, and that it is not the position of this government to support the Thatcher position on sanctions?
Well, Mr. Speaker, that's obviously a question that should be taken under consideration by the Leader of Government, the Premier, and I'll bring the question to his attention.
Member for Calgary-Buffalo, followed by the member for Edmonton Highlands.
I have a question for the Honourable Minister of Hospitals and Medicare. There are many qualified foreign doctors in Alberta who can't practice because they can't get internship positions. At the same time, there's only one Vietnamese doctor in the city of Calgary for 20,000 Vietnamese and 3 Spanish-speaking doctors for approximately 10,000 Spanish-speaking Calgarians. Similar problems in Edmonton. Will the minister assure the House that he is actively reviewing the needs of these and other immigrant communities for medical care in their own language?
No, Mr. Speaker, I cannot assure that at all. As a matter of fact, it would be most appropriate for doctors who come here from other countries to learn the English language as soon as practical, because you cannot effectively practice medicine in this country without going through that process. I might add that for us to actively find ways to increase the spaces for immigrant doctors at the expense of young people who have grown up in this country and proceeded through our schools of medicine would not be something that I would be in favor of doing. On the other hand, the problem of immigrant doctors is a national one and should be dealt with at that level, and we're trying to assist the federal government coming to grips with the problem. But it's not our intention to go about a process of making sure that everyone who comes to Alberta can have medical services in their own language. Not at all.
Yes, the problem is not the language of the doctors, it's the language of the immigrant communities. Has the minister consulted with ethnic groups in Alberta to determine the magnitude of the problem which faces them in getting medical care that they can understand, and in a language in which they can be understood?
Well, I haven't consulted, but my understanding is that without exception, there would be probably no one who's immigrated to Canada who's not getting far better health care now than they did previously. And I only reiterate, Mr. Speaker, that there are, I believe, enough interpretation services available within those communities that adequate medical service can and is being provided.
Why does the minister pass the buck to the... Pardon me? Yes, through the chair, I was wondering why the minister passes the buck to the federal government when it's the Alberta Provincial College of Physicians and Surgeons which sets rules with respect to practicing in this province.
Mr. Speaker, I wasn't passing the buck at all. I was saying that, frankly, I don't agree with the member.
Well, Mr. Speaker, will the minister give the House an undertaking that he will look into this serious problem as soon as possible?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I've already told the honourable member that I don't regard it as a serious problem. There are in this province, surely, in the ethnic communities, available resources for interpretation that will allow anyone to have adequate medical service. And it's not our intention to embark upon a program of ensuring that people have medical services in whatever language might be their native tongue. I believe very strongly that there are people, volunteers and others, who can quite well accommodate the relationship between a patient and a doctor to ensure that they have adequate medical attention.
Supplementary member for Edmonton Highlands.
Supplement that question, the question and the answer. I might say that in response to the honourable member from Buffalo's question, I have met just last week with many of the immigrant aid associations in Alberta. I think I met with some 7 or 8 of them. That question did come up, and it was very clear to me that the immigrant aid associations in Edmonton and Calgary play a very significant role in liaising with the medical practitioners in this province, together with the new immigrants. And certainly it's an ongoing challenge, but I can tell you that the funding that we give these organizations is paying off, particularly in this area, because they are working very closely between the new immigrants who are having trouble with the language and doctors who provide them medical care.
Speaker, following the responses from the Minister of Hospitals and Medical Care, I wonder if he will give the Assembly the assurance that this government does intend to provide the support for the multi-level health care facility at the Chinese Elders Mansion in Edmonton so that they can have an auxiliary hospital which is sensitive to the linguistic needs of the people in that area.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I fail to detect any relationship whatsoever with that question and the line of questioning that was coming earlier, but it is a different item. It's the provision of extended care services in the city of Edmonton. The Chinese community have met with me as recently as week before last, I believe, to discuss that matter. The venture that they're proposing is somewhat different than anything that has been proposed before, and it requires some funding for private sector or charitable organizations with respect to nursing homes. Would also require a very substantial change in the government's policy with respect to the operation of auxiliary hospitals. All of those things are now being considered. They obviously have budgetary implications. I'm not sure when or if we will be able to respond in a positive way to that particular proposal, but it is something that I'm currently considering.
Time for question period has expired. There are a number of issues to be dealt with before the House proceeds further with business. First is that the Associate Minister of Agriculture has a correction with regard to a ministerial statement as previously given.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I wish to correct an omission that I made in my ministerial statement Friday, August the 8th. I omitted the appointment of John Crowell, Nampa, who is a farmer representing northern Alberta. He was mentioned in the news release, but not in my ministerial statement, and I apologize for that oversight.
The Chair has received notification of 2 points of order to be raised. The Chair recognizes first the member for West Loch Sturgeon.
As Mr. Speaker was on the point of order on the supplementary that you denied. I appeal it for 2 reasons. One is, first of all, you mentioned, I believe, that one of the reasons was that vote 5 was coming up in the estimates, but it cannot be raised in estimates because the Department of Agricultural estimates have already been completed. So therefore and the second reason that even if that were so, that cannot be raised even though the Department estimates have been completed. I don't see how you can rule a question has been asked if it's not a question. If you get up and rule that it's not a question, therefore I should be able to proceed with my question. In other words, I can't be taken away. A privilege can't be taken away that I didn't have in the first place.
The honourable member got up and made a point, and it's left on the record as being a fact, and it's not a fact, and I'm not sure when a question is raised as such that we should leave it hanging in midair when an allegation has been made. The member well knows that the reduction in research last year was the weather modification reduction, and that program is under review, and he left the implication that there was a total and absolute reduction, and that's untrue.
The chair is always fascinated and interested to listen to points of order, especially those that emanate from the leader of the Liberal Party. Perhaps it has something to do with the fact that both of us come from southern Alberta. There's something involved in the synergism. Nevertheless, it is not the chair's responsibility to frame questions on behalf of members. And when as in this case, a supplementary question was raised, the matter should have been raised as a question that was acceptable to the formulas of the House. And if the member who originates the question has not been able to frame the question appropriately, it's the view of the chair that nevertheless the opportunity for supplementary has then passed. With respect to the purported point of order, the question was with respect to agricultural estimates. The estimates have not yet come to a conclusion. Hopefully they might come to that stage later in the day. And the other matter is this, that with respect to raising a question which may or may not relate to the estimates, that the honourable member should indeed frame the question and make no reference to the estimates, but just indeed come forth with the question. Chair recognizes the member for Calgary Mountain View on a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As yet another member of this Assembly from Southern Alberta, in view of your previous comments, I somewhat hesitate in also raising a point of order. But earlier in question period, Mr. Speaker, you ruled out a line of questioning of mine to the Minister of Recreation and Parks. And I think the Minister himself cited the fact that there's a motion for return on the order paper regarding this matter. So in reviewing the citations in Beauchesne, I no doubt imagine that in ruling on that point of order, you look to citation 357, at citation 171, which is as follows: in putting a question, a member must confine himself, etc., and not under section V anticipate an order of the day or other matters. Mr. Speaker, in the 5th edition of Beauchesne, the second section of that citation goes on to read that one need only look at citation 171 of Beauchene's 4th edition, in which will be found numerous and in many cases inoperable restrictions covering the form and content of questions. I suggest if each and every one of these restrictions were applied in every case,